This week I got to talk with Keith Giles about his newest book, The Quantum Gospel of Mary and the Lost Gospel of Truth. It is a fascinating book. We have a fascinating conversation about how the books that were included in the Bible were chosen and maybe why Mary's was not included, and how we can interpret different parts of the Bible via this perspective as well. So here's the synopsis. The Gospel of Mary may have been written as early as 80 CE or as late as 180 CE, but no matter where you place it in the timeline of early Christian texts, it still remains one of the more controversial writings ever studied. The Gospel of Truth was most likely written between 140 and 180 CE, and until its discovery at Nag Hammadi, Egypt in 1945, was one of the several gospel texts suppressed by the Proto-Orthodox Church for suggesting that everyone was already one with the divine. In this book, author Keith Giles offers a look at both texts through the lens of shared divinity. His thesis is that both of these lost gospels provide a window into the revolutionary teachings of Jesus that point to a quantum spiritual reality that we are all connected to God and to one another. You know, I've been on a streak of talking about this kind of stuff lately, and truly the most powerful part of this book is thinking about Christianity in a sense where everyone is already part of the divine. There isn't this lurking fear of hell. There isn't this huge judgment that you should just always be feeling about yourself, and that actually we are all connected to each other, which I think is a very powerful message for nowadays. So that being said, let's hear from Keith. I am super excited to be here with Keith Giles, who, when I was looking at all the books you have written so many books. I'm thoroughly impressed. It's a backlist I'll have to slowly work my way through. But I am super excited to talk about the Quantum Gospel of Mary and just all of your interpretations theologically. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation. And I've been writing a lot of books over the last several years, and lately it's kind of my main thing. I never thought that was possible, but
That's cool.
yeah. So yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah.
And
So what kind of brought you to, I mean, I know there's all kinds of backstory, I'm sure,
sure.
but what kind of brought you to writing in general, and then specifically you have the the quantum sayings of Jesus, and then
Mhm.
the quantum gospel of Mary. So what also kind of brought you to those subjects?
Yeah. Well, writing books, or writing in general, I mean, I've always wanted to be a writer since I was a little kid. I think my dream initially was I was going to write science fiction, but
Oh,
that hasn't happened yet. Although I am going to publish a novella next year. So
I'd say I'm intrigued by that.
yeah, I'm dipping my toes into that, going back to that. But well, no. But I always wanted to be a writer. Many years ago, golly, probably like 20 years ago. Yeah, something like that. It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, I I started a blog. This is back when blogging was a big deal, and
Yeah.
back in those days.
Yeah.
And the blog. So I some of the blog posts, I kind of self-published a couple of books based on some of the blog posts. I self-published like I don't know, probably like 6 books before I found a publisher. And so yeah, once I started having success as a writer, it was like,
Hmm.
okay, I love writing and I like to be able to do this and engage with people either through blogging or through my books, and that kind of thing. I think the the when all my books have been all the books that I published have been sort of nonfiction, theological kind of
Hmm.
things, and typically they're based on my own kind of journey. You know what I mean? Things that
Yeah.
I'm learning, and then I'm like, hey, wow, this was amazing. This was helpful to me. I'm sure other people would also, it help them to know
Yes.
these things. And what I try to do when I'm writing, and hopefully people notice this, even though I am trying to share information, I am trying to help people, learn something.
Hmm.
I'm also trying to help people think for themselves. So like,
Hmm.
uh, in all the books I've done, I typically will say something along the lines of like, you don't, at the end of the book, you don't have to agree with me. You don't have to land where I land.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope you would at least, listen to what I'm saying, look at what I'm talking about, and think about these things, right? I think
Yeah.
to engage people and to get them thinking about stuff, um, that's what gets me excited, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, so writing the last two books I've done, so the Quantum Sayings of Jesus, which is
Mm-hmm.
about Thomas, the Gospel of Thomas, and this one, the Gospel of Mary, which also in this book is included the Gospel of Truth. So
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of a two-in-one in this one. I came to those by way of, well, I had just finished writing the 7-part book series called the Jesus Unbook series.
Mm.
And each one of those 7 books dealt with a specific bit of the theology I grew up with
Yeah.
that over time I figured out like what I was told wasn't accurate.
Yeah.
And what I realized was I didn't really have an education. I had an indoctrination.
Mm.
Because an education would have been, hey, Keith, this is all the information about this particular topic. Even if the people teaching me had said, and we prefer this, you know,
Right.
version,
Interpretation.
yeah, or interpretation, sure. But I would have known all of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I could have made up my own mind. So I kind of had to come sort of unlearn a bunch of things I was taught. That's why I wrote the Jesus Un series. So,
Yeah.
um, and so that in that series, I dealt with everything from the doctrine of hell and the second coming of Jesus and how do we approach the Bible and faith and politics and so many things.
Yeah.
So I'd finished that series and I kind of reached a place of kind of like, now what? Like I know
Right.
what I don't believe anymore, and I kind
Mm-hmm.
of think I know in general where I land. But I just was like, where do I go now? Just on my own journey, not just even as an author.
Right.
So the first book I wrote after that was a book called Sola Mysterium, celebrating the beautiful uncertainty of everything.
Mm.
And that was the beginning of what led me to where I'm now. So what I realized is that what I had been doing to that point was theology, right? I've been
Mm.
talking about theology. What is theology? Theology is essentially the study trying to understand God, and God by definition is a being beyond all human comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized was it's kind of insane to say, hey, there's this being beyond all human comprehension, and now let me tell you all about them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing? What am I trying to do here? So that's when I was
Yes.
like, you know what? I think it isn't about having all the right information about God. I think it's actually not information. It's actually about transformation. And
Mm.
the transformation is more about your experience with the divine and
Yeah.
less about getting all your little doctrines lined up perfectly, like as if there's some cosmic quiz you're going to all have to pass at some point,
Yes.
to get all the answers correct. So yeah, I wrote Sola Mysterium, and in writing that book, I started getting into quantum science and
Mm-hmm.
started really like that was the beginning for me of noticing how quantum physics was beginning to confirm many of the things that mystics from many traditions, not just Christianity,
Yeah.
Buddhism, Hinduism, people like Black Elk and Native American shaman and Rumi and others have been noticing for a very long time, which is that everything is connected,
Yes.
that duality is not reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was very exciting. And then the more I moved in that direction, around the same time, I started looking at the Gospel of Thomas. And what blew my mind was that the only way to make sense of the Gospel of Thomas is to read it through that understanding of kind of a quantum reality that everything is connected and we are all connected to the divine and therefore we're all connected to one another.
Yes.
So that was super exciting to me. That book, The Quantum Sayings of Jesus, um, was I had so much fun writing that book.
Yeah.
And I kind of say like I feel like that's the answer. This realization is the answer to everything for me.
Yeah.
Um, so like I think literally, and it sounds hokey, but I really believe this. I think that if we as humanity
Mm-hmm.
can really wrap our brains around this and begin living from this reality of we're all connected to God,
Yes.
everyone, and we're all connected to one another, that we all
Mm-hmm.
have a shared divinity and a shared humanity.
Yes.
I say it's the answer to everything because this is the way you love your neighbor as yourself. Because when
Mm-hmm.
you look at your neighbor, you don't see another person, you see yourself. This is how you love your enemy. Because when you look at your enemy, you don't see an enemy, you see Christ, you see God, you see the divine in them.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it's, if we could really do this, this is the end of war, famine,
Yes.
um, you know, prejudice,
Yeah.
all the problems, all the major problems that humanity faces.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what gets me excited about this topic.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so after I wrote Thomas, it was sort of like natural to be like, okay, what's next? And
Mm-hmm.
I looked at the Gospel of Mary,
Yeah.
and yeah, and even more excited. There's just amazing stuff in the Gospel of Mary.
Yes.
So I'm
There.
writing a series right now. So those are the first two, um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm working on at this moment I'm working on a commentary in the Gospel of Philip, and then I'm also going to write a book about the sayings of the Apostle Paul, which are actually um, along the same lines of non-duality and connection. So
Yeah. That's awesome. Uh, well, I agree with so much of what you just said. I have so many other questions too.
yeah,
Kind of just to set the stage for anyone who's kind of new to the Gnostic Gospels, Gospels that didn't make it into the Bible.
yeah,
Can you kind of talk about, like, briefly about the
sure.
history of these Gospels that weren't included?
I will try.
Or
Well,
it doesn't
there.
have to be brief. I have time.
Okay, all right. But I will try to keep it
Yeah.
fairly brief. So yeah, I mean that's the big shock, right? Like being raised in an evangelical conservative Christian home, there's only four gospels,
Right.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But then, you start studying and finding out that, oh no, actually there are lots of different gospels.
Hmm.
And by the way, lots of different Christianities.
Yeah.
Dr. Elaine Pagels has an excellent book called Beyond Belief,
Okay.
where, and this is the book that blew my mind about this, because the ironic thing is I had studied early church history for a long time,
Uh-huh.
but always from the perspective of orthodoxy, right? Like
Mm.
Irenaeus, Tertullian, what we call the church fathers. But that's only one stream. That's only one voice of early Christianity. What Dr. Pagels points out is that, and many other scholars point out, is that early Christianity, the first couple hundred years, it wasn't a monolith, right?
Mm-mm.
Essentially, if you could go back in time, you would encounter dozens of different groups of people
Mm-hmm.
who all would have said that they followed Jesus, but they all would have had slightly different, or sometimes, vastly different
Mm-hmm.
ways of understanding who Jesus was, what Jesus taught, what it meant to be a follower of Jesus. But they would have all said, I'm a Christian, or I follow
Mm-hmm.
Jesus. And so that's number one. So when you understand that and you realize that, then it makes sense that there were many other gospels out there.
Mm-hmm.
We know, I talk about this in the Quantum Sayings of Jesus, the sort of the timeline, the historicity of this.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, the people that we now call the Orthodox, who have convinced us all that they were the only Christians that ever were around,
Yeah.
well,
Right.
they did that by erasing all those other, Christian voices. And one of the ways they did that was under Constantine, one of the church fathers named Athanasius.
Mm.
Again, under the authority of Rome, right, the Roman Empire, he wrote a letter it's called the Easter letter,
Mm.
to all these Christian seminaries and churches and schools, around that time, and like 340 AD. And basically, what he tells them is they can no longer use certain texts in their sermons, in their teachings, in their homilies, in their education.
Yeah.
And well, first of all, that tells us something. That means until 340 AD, Christians were using all of those different texts in all
Right.
of their, education and teaching and sermons and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this letter, we have a list of the books that he essentially says, don't use these anymore. In response, most Christians burned or destroyed those texts. At least one person that we know of in Nag Hammadi, Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
probably at a seminary or something there, or maybe he was a monk or something, right? A
Mm-hmm.
monastery. Um, anyway, he took these texts and about 30 something texts, and he put them in a jar and sealed it and buried it in the sand. And it sat there until like 1940 something, and then it was discovered. So it was this amazing time capsule of books.
Mm-hmm.
So the Nag Hammadi discovery, that's where we found the Gospel of Thomas, but we also found the Gospel of Philip and the Apocrypha of John, the Gospel of Truth, Thunder Perfect Mind. There's so many different
Mm-hmm.
texts that were discovered. And so that discovery has, allowed us to shine a light into some of what was going on for the first couple hundred years of church history. So the thing that's fascinating about that I personally find exciting about like writing a book about Thomas and writing a book about Mary and Philip and the gospel of truth and things like this is that this is such a brand new field, like this discovery, the discovery of these texts, at least the translation of them has been in my lifetime, right? They were only translated into English like in the 1970s or something. I was
Mm-hmm.
born in 66. Um, so if you think about it, we have 2,000 years of commentary and study on Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Mm-hmm.
We've got about 40 to 50 years of study on Thomas and Mary and Philip and all these other texts, right? It's brand new. We just are beginning to look at them and study them and find out what were they saying, what did they mean, and
Right.
how do they apply. So yeah, that's the exciting thing about it. So hopefully, yeah, listen, if listeners don't know,
Yeah.
yeah, there are a lot of other texts that are out there. Um, and yeah, and I think at least Thomas and Mary and Philip and some of the others, specifically Nag Hammadi texts, are definitely worth studying.
Yeah. Yeah, the something I thought was really interesting that you kind of write about at the beginning of this book is that there's a Harvard theologian who basically says I never call the Gospel of Mary a Gnostic text because there was no such thing as Gnosticism. Kind of coming from the idea that it like it is just someone else's perspective of what was
Yeah,
happening at that time.
yeah.
And the more that I've learned, I kind of went through the way I explain it. I kind of went through deconstruction about like when I was like 19 and 20. I'm a pastor's kid.
Hmm.
So I went through a deconstruction that had a lot attached to it, as it probably always does.
Sure, yeah.
And it was just kind of it was definitely evangelical white family who there was an obsession with being in the world and not of it. So like lived
Right.
in a bubble essentially.
Hmm.
So it was kind of like I had to tease out like abuse. I had to kind of go through like what's difficult for me about the Bible, which I really resonated with what you were saying at the beginning is like sometimes it's just the interpretations and
Yeah.
how it's used. And also what was so hard for me was like, so this God who created me knowing I was going to be imperfect, but then
Mm.
he got angry at me for being imperfect and
Right.
had to send his son. It feels like resentment. It feels like all kinds
Yeah.
of that. So that was
Yeah.
kind of my first deconstruction. It feels like now I'm having another one
Yes.
where I'm kind of like, okay, there are also just like different interpretations.
Yes.
And religion is used for
Yes.
control and mixes with the government. So that's
Yes.
kind of my feeling with this Gnosticism. It feels like these are more loving, maybe
Hmm.
gospels or like more
Yeah.
generous interpretations. Is
Yes.
that kind of how you felt when you've been reading
Yes.
them?
No, thank you. I think that's actually a very accurate assessment of that.
Hmm.
You're right. Like I always say when I talk about Thomas and Mary and things like they're not Gnostic texts.
Yeah.
Um, even what you would call Gnosticism, what people call Gnosticism,
Hmm.
which is really Sethian Gnosticism, it has
Yeah.
very specific teachings about a demigod that created the universe that's not the real
Mm.
God, all these angelic hierarchies and archons and things like this. And none of that is in Thomas doesn't talk about that. Mary doesn't talk about that. Philip doesn't talk about that. Like, so
Yeah.
they're not even Gnostic text if you want to say something is Gnostic.
Hmm.
But you make a great point though about like the deconstruction process and how the Bible really is the hardest thing. Like in that 7-part series that I wrote, I mentioned,
Hmm.
um, Jesus Unbound is the book that I wrote about. It's called Liberating the Word of God from the Bible. And it's
Okay.
about approaching how to approach the Bible. And I always tell people, even though I didn't write that book first, I always say you should read that book first
Okay.
in the series because I think it's such a critical thing. The way you approach the Bible and the way you understand the Bible will impact the way you understand everything else.
Yes.
Because, like you
Especially
said,
living in America.
oh yes. Oh
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. The Bible. Well, in fact, I just gave I was just in Canada a couple weeks ago and I gave a
Uh-huh.
talk, which is crazy. Christian nationalism is starting to happen in Canada now.
Yeah, I believe it.
So I flew up there to talk to this college group there about Christian nationalism. And what I talked about was the Bible, was
Yeah.
exactly this. Like
Yes.
because the way you approach the Bible makes it, I shouldn't say the way you approach the Bible, the way you are told to approach the Bible.
Right.
Because it is about fear and shame and guilt, and those things give them control over you as a
Hmm.
human being.
Hmm.
And so that can only happen if you allow people, convince people to convince you that the Bible is sort of like this flat, authoritative document. It makes it easier for nationalism, Christian nationalism, to take place, and
Yes.
many other horrible things, right?
Yeah,
The fear and shame, the
fundamentalism
guilt.
in
Yeah,
general.
yeah,
Hmm.
no, exactly. It's pretty crucial to fundamentalism.
Hmm.
So yeah, the way we approach the Bible is important, and I think untangling that is really the first step, to realizing. So like the things that I talk about in Thomas, that I see in
Hmm.
Thomas, that I see in Mary, this message of non-duality, this message that we're all connected to God and we're all connected to one another.
Hmm.
Here's what's crazy. Once I saw that and wrote about that in those books, from those texts, I started noticing that, you know what? Those same things are in Matthew and John and in Ephesians and
Yeah.
in Galatians and Colossians. Like, that's why I'm going to write a book about the quantum sayings of Paul, because Paul talks about this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And so did Jesus, So it's not as if we only get these teachings in these quote unquote Gnostic texts or Nag Hammadi texts or these, extra biblical texts. They're
Hmm.
in the New Testament text too. They're
Yes.
just not emphasized,
Right.
right? That's not the stuff that gets preached over and over and over again.
Hmm.
So I think being able to see it, the things that Jesus says in Thomas, the things that are said in Mary, um, this non-dualism, right? Wow, this is amazing. And then going, well, wait a minute, Paul said something similar. Jesus said something similar.
Hmm.
You realize that this is where these guys got it, right?
Yeah.
Why could somebody in the first century, second century, call themselves a Christian, have a gospel of Thomas, have a gospel of Philip, or the gospel of, and talk this way and be accepted because
Yeah.
Jesus talked this way, because Paul talked this way, because
Yeah.
lots of other Christians thought this way at the time.
Hmm.
This idea, yeah, like you said, more loving, more accepting.
Hmm.
Um, like in Elaine Pagel's book, Beyond Belief,
Hmm.
when she's talking about these different Christianities, plural, she talks about one group called the Valentinians.
Hmm.
And I was reading about the Valentinian Christians and what people like Irenaeus and some of the Orthodox Christians didn't like about them. And what I found that they didn't like about them was like everything I would love about them. Like I was like, if I lived back then, I'd be a Valentinian
Right.
because they didn't believe in hierarchy.
Mm.
They like Irenaeus and other church fathers were upset that the Valentinians, like when they came together, they allowed women to
Yeah.
baptize people. They allowed children to read the scriptures out loud. They allowed, like, in other words, like everyone was included.
Yeah.
It was like they were the body of Christ and everyone had a role to play and everyone was accepted as an
Hmm.
equal. And I'm like, that's awesome.
Yes.
Wow. I want to live in the alternate reality where that's the Christianity that won the day. You know what I mean?
This, yeah,
That
that
would have been awesome.
persisted.
Unfortunately, it's not. It's the
No.
patriarchal,
Yes.
hierarchical one that was all about power and control and all that.
Yeah, which is actually the verses you cannot find you don't find Jesus saying that's what it was supposed to be. You find the opposite when you're
Yeah.
just reading what people have said about Jesus. That's
Yes.
what's been fascinating to me, just learning more probably in the last year or two, where I got to a point where I was like, well, I want to know some more about this, like especially since Christian nationalism is,
Yeah.
I mean, it's affecting everyone's lives, whether they accept that or not yet.
That's right.
So I got really interested in it as well. And then I was like, I mean, politically, Jesus would be my homeboy essentially.
Yes, he would. Yes, he would. Yes. He'd
Um,
be telling you to do what, by the way, the Jewish scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures say, care for the poor,
yeah.
love the immigrant, treat them as one of your own. Like all of that, that's all quote unquote biblical.
Yeah.
Right. And so Jesus was all about that, right? The Sermon on the Mount is all about,
Yes.
I was naked and you clothed me. I was hungry. You gave me something to eat. I would, like, this is Matthew 25 is like
The
the
marching
standard by like
orders.
who gets in and who doesn't. It's
Yes.
not, do you know the right theology? Did you say the prayer? Did you go to church every Sunday? Did you
Hmm.
tithe regularly? No, it's like, did you love your fellow human being? Did you have compassion and mercy on people?
Yes.
That's what matters.
Yes.
Yeah. exactly.
That was early on in the book you mentioned I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the direct quote, but like if sin was off the table, how would
Yes.
your relationship with God change? But then also how would your relationship with everyone else change?
Yes.
So can
Yes.
you kind of talk to people about
Yeah.
like how Jesus kind of says like sin is he's almost saying sin is a man-made
No, he does.
construct.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the Gospel of Mary, I mean, we're missing the first sort of the intro of it. We're missing
Yeah.
like the first 6 or 7 pages. And so so where it begins, the disciples are just asking him questions.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it begins at the with a question like Peter asked, what is sin?
Yeah.
And Jesus' response is there is no sin. Like sin is an illusion. Sin is something that you guys invented. You made this up, right? And by the way, that's consistent with other things Jesus also says in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Right.
This idea that because like when we look at Jesus in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, he forgives sins all the time.
Yes.
No one ever asks Jesus, please forgive me, and yet he's forgiving them constantly. It's the first thing out of his mouth. Your sins are forgiven. Now, what do you want? What's your name? Why are you
Mhm.
here? Like, so, yeah, Jesus sets up this idea that, and the Gospel of Mary just flat out says it. Sin is in your head. Sin is your problem. And meaning human beings, we're the ones keeping track, right?
Mm-hmm.
Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, love keeps no record of wrongs. And if
Mm-hmm.
God is love, then that means God isn't keeping the record of wrongs. We are. We're
Yes.
keeping the score, right? Um, there's also a passage in 2 Corinthians where Paul says, God was in Christ, not counting your sins against you,
Mm.
but reconciling the world to himself. Never heard a sermon on that my whole life.
Me
But
neither.
what a radical, but see, that's all consistent with what Jesus says in the Gospel of Mary. He answers Peter by saying, there's no sin. Sin is in your head. Get over it, right?
Yeah.
As far as God is concerned, all right, I have cast your sins as far as the east is from the west. I remember them no more. Why do you keep bringing up this sin stuff? And why do you keep holding it over one another? Because see, that's really what happens.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, you're this sinner, you're that kind of sinner.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on right now in the world today, right?
Yes.
You broke the law. What do you not understand about the word illegal? They
Yeah.
came here illegally. They broke the law, right?
Yeah.
They're sinners.
And just
Or,
calling people illegals, like so
yes.
demeaning.
Yes. Yeah. So again, we're the ones who do this kind of thing. God doesn't do these kind of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I do ask that question in the Bible, like, wow, just imagine if that teaching had
Mm-hmm.
stuck. If Christianity was known for this this insistence that sin was in our head and we need
Mm-hmm.
to just get over it because God's not holding it over us. We got to
No.
stop holding it over one another. And then, yeah, the question like, how would your life be different if you didn't look at other people through that filter of their sin? And
Yeah.
if you didn't look at yourself that way, right?
Yes.
I mean, talk about being set free. That's really
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be a much calmer existence in your own mind towards yourself.
Yes.
And I think some of it too, I think dogma can help you feel like you have control and can help you feel like you
Oh, yeah.
understand things for sure.
Yes.
And that's like that was a lot of my 20s was unlearning or not unlearning, but just learning that wanting everything to be black and white not only isn't possible, but it's actually like I wouldn't want a black and white world as much as I think I do.
Right.
So I think it would help us, so like you're saying, so much even in how we talk to ourselves, but also how we talk
Yeah.
to others.
Yeah.
Um, Here's one of my questions I've had kind of recently. So, like, I love this approach to either Christianity or religion or spirituality, whatever it is, of understanding we're all interconnected. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
And that's I've also been learning just like so much of the history of the United States that I wasn't taught in school.
It's not good, is it? It's
It's
pretty,
not pretty. There's
no.
another example of like stuff
Yeah.
that just we were like, let's just hide this. Like people don't need to hear too much about that. And one of the things that I've like really noticed so much to your point about how even like shamans,
Yeah.
Some indigenous Native American cultures feel this same connectedness.
Yeah.
Is I'm like like I lost out on hearing from like in the case of America, Black and indigenous cultures have so
Yeah.
much respect for interconnectedness and like
Yeah.
approach community so much different than the like pull yourself
Yeah.
up by your bootstraps
Yeah.
mentality I grew up around. And it's like that's such a beautiful approach. And I think we would all be treating each other better and taking care of each other if we
Yes.
even had more of that, instead of just suppressing either just genocide or slavery with these
Yeah.
other cultures. But then when I start getting into thinking about this, like thinking we are all one, there's also, and forgiveness.
Yeah.
We have like Jesus flipping the tables too when people
Yes.
were basically using the church for capitalism and
Yep.
control.
Yep.
So can you,
Oppressing the poor.
yeah,
That was what he was upset about.
yeah, do you have a like, so that's that I've heard people bring that up and be like, he wasn't forgiving them for that. So, but for me, it's kind of like he was loving everyone else by trying to keep them safe from these people. So do you
Yeah.
fall somewhere there?
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, because I think, yeah, loving everyone and forgiveness and all that, yes, is very important. But at the same time, Jesus was all about justice.
Mm-hmm.
And justice, now it's not retributive. It's not in the sense of like we got to go get them and punish them.
Right.
It's more of like pointing out the injustice when
Yeah.
people are suffering, right? Jesus is always on the side of those on the bottom, right?
Mm-hmm.
The poor, the orphan, the widow, the oppressed, speaking out
Yes.
for them, pointing out those that are doing the oppressing and that kind of thing. So yeah, you have to balance that, you
Hmm.
know? You don't, it doesn't mean loving everyone doesn't mean letting them get away with it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, as an example, I hope this
Hmm.
is appropriate.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope this is okay to say this.
Oh, I'm sure it
Like,
is.
okay, well, I see this all the time. I just had a conversation recently with someone about this. Like, so like, you know, with like going on over in Israel, right?
Yeah.
And raised as a Christian, conservative Christian, you were always told we have to bless Israel, right?
Yeah.
And what they mean by that is, right? Just anything Israel does, we have to just stand back and let it happen and
Right.
or support it and cheer it on and say, yep, this is good.
Hmm.
But here's the thing. Um, all of the Old Testament prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, like all of them, you can't name one, major
Hmm.
or minor prophet, um, who didn't bless Israel. But how did they bless Israel? By pointing out their sins.
Mm.
But I don't mean sins in the sense of like we just talked about, okay, sin isn't
Right.
real. Like pointing out the injustices, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
By saying, woe to you. If you keep doing this, right, bad things are going to happen to your nation. This is not good. This is going to yield bad fruit for
Right.
everyone, right? And Jesus does the same thing. Flipping the tables over in the temple is Jesus blessing Israel. But he's
Hmm.
blessing them by saying, this is wrong. Stop it, right?
Yes.
You're hurting people.
Yes.
That's blessing Israel. Okay.
I like
It's
that.
not standing by and cheering it on. So I think
Hmm.
it's reframing understanding like if you love someone, you don't allow them to continue to do harm to others because you
True.
also recognize that if we're all connected, they're
Hmm.
also harming themselves,
True.
right?
Hmm.
Right? So to see harm being done, to recognize the scope of that harm
Hmm.
that's being done, and to stand up against it in the strongest way you can to
Yeah.
stop it, right? Um, all of that is in line with, you know, being a prophet or being someone like Jesus who stands up, who loves others,
Yeah.
and who's all about reconciliation and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, the stuff with Israel for me too, it obviously it's just such a tricky conversation for all kinds of reasons. There's already a lot of anti-Semitism that has not like
Yeah,
disappeared, like that's still there. So
right, of
I
course.
understand how some people are like, hey, like or I don't know. I understand how some people don't want that to, well, all of us should want that to not get worse.
Yes, of
But
course.
I've had a couple conversations recently where like I think it's also so important to remember that like it's Israel's government. Like it is a
Yes,
very select few people in that actual country where like
yes. It's
just
not
like we
every
wouldn't
person in Israel
want,
wants this. No,
yeah, and like just like I mean the KKK here
right.
used religion. Like there's
Yes,
there's like "We love Christ" signs behind
Yes.
them like the whole
Yes.
time, and I would hope that no one would just lump me into that because I was white
That's
and
right.
lived in America and was a Christian. Well, I wasn't
That's right.
alive at that time, but that's the
Yeah.
other thing. I think we forget that it's like when we talk about countries, typically like capital, what am I trying to think? Proper noun countries, we're really talking
Yeah.
about their
Yeah.
government, not all the people there.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's
Good point.
important to pay attention to as
But
well.
but your question also, I think, I don't know if this is where you were going as well,
Hmm.
but I think you can't um obviously the positive side of this idea that, oh wow, it's so amazing and beautiful that we're all connected to God
Hmm.
and then therefore all connected to one another. And because the way, like the way the Gospel of Thomas says it, that Christ is in everyone, and the Gospel of Mary says the same thing. I think Jesus
Yeah.
says to all the disciples in the Gospel of Mary that the child of humanity is within you.
Hmm.
And and the child of humanity is almost a rephrasing of the term son
Son
of
of,
man,
yeah.
which is a
Hmm.
messianic, again, the term of Christ.
Yeah.
So all that's the positive side. That's beautiful. That's amazing. I mean, the more you meditate on that, wow, how amazing is that, right?
Yeah.
But you can't meditate on that very long before you have to go, wait a minute. If everyone has Christ in them, if everyone
Hmm.
has the spark of the divine in them,
Hmm.
and I am connected to that same divine, and therefore to everyone else,
Hmm.
I'm also connected to these people that are doing all these awful,
Right.
horrible, genocidal, just awful things.
Hmm.
Um, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
Right? Because now it's like, what? How does
Hmm.
that work? Right? So that's a very difficult thing. And and it definitely came up in my studying of this and trying to live this out, that's you
Yeah.
bump into that pretty quickly, like, oh, okay, what do we do about that?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it is like some of it reminds me of the nature versus nurture
Yeah.
argument, where like who knows what percentage of either of those like affects who we become. It's
Yeah.
probably different for every person too, and like then
Yeah.
you're wondering like what was your innate temperament versus like how
Yeah.
you were treated.
Yeah.
uh I would hope, like, I guess when I try to think about it really hard, which I do sometimes, you would almost hope that it means that in some sense at some point there would technically be a way to scratch into that person's humanity is like
Yes.
kind of what I try to imagine. And then
Oh yeah.
with like pedophiles and
Hmm.
abusers and all of that, it's hard to imagine, but it's like sometimes I try to be like, okay, it means that like in some circumstance maybe we could find that little humanity inside them.
Right. Right. No, I totally agree with you on that. Yeah. I mean, I think we know this even from psychology, that
Hmm.
people that do, hurt people, right?
Right.
So people who commit horrible crimes,
Yeah.
yes, we see what they do and we say that's awful and horrible and all that. Yes, and we're right, that is horrible. But, quite often an abuser was abused.
Right.
Um, and then we can hopefully have some compassion for the little child
Hmm.
who was abused, who then later grew up to become also an abuser. We don't excuse the abuse, but we understand that, we have some compassion for this person that, again, something happened in their past that pushed them in this direction, right? So the other thing about it is, like, there's a great analogy. This has helped me to think of it
Hmm.
this way. Like, and I got it from Richard Rohr,
Oh yeah.
and he got it from somebody else. So it's it's not really from him, but he got it from someone else. But I've always held on to it. Um, he tells a story about this woman who was on a subway train in I think in England,
Hmm.
in the tubes, whatever.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, it was like she just had this mystical kind of moment where everyone she looked at, she saw Christ in them.
Wow.
And it was just overwhelming to her. And then she got out of the train and went up to the street level, and then everyone on the sidewalk. Like this lasted for like a day or two.
Hmm.
Everyone she looked at, she saw Christ in them. And she talked about how amazing that experience was. But then she said, what was interesting was that she was in some people, when I saw Christ in them, it was bright and shining and beautiful, and it was just overwhelming. But other
Hmm.
people, when I looked at them, I saw Christ in them. But it was as if Christ was dead in his tomb,
Oh.
awaiting resurrection.
I
And for
like that
me, that
analogy.
analogy, that's what helps me make sense of it. That
Yes.
Christ is in everyone,
Yeah.
but in the sense of like dead, but coming, but a resurrection is
He,
inevitable, I think.
right.
It's
Yeah.
going to happen, maybe in this life, maybe in the next,
Right.
but there will be a realization, there will be an awakening of that. Um, I have to believe that. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you want to believe in that. I just interviewed a poet named Palumi Olatimpo. He wrote a book called Manifest Destiny. Um, and he was talking about how it's a lot about how actually, interestingly, he's from Nigeria. And when he was studying to get his citizenship here, he was like, oh, a lot of the stuff that was going on here is the same as what's going on in Gaza, was like what was clicking in
yes,
his head. So
yes,
there's a lot of poetry that's breaking down what has happened in America, what is happening in Gaza. But
yeah,
he also has these love poems included, and I asked him about it, and I was like, I thought that was nice because like we want to remember what we're like hoping for and what we would want to
yeah,
work towards. And
yeah.
he said that he was like, I'm glad you kind of said that. My publicist was like, I don't know if love poems fit here. And he was like, we've got to have the example of what we're able to hope for.
That
So I kind
yes,
of think that's similar to what you were
yeah.
just saying.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we
Yeah.
have to hold on to that hope that that in the end love does win.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't always happen and we don't get to live to see it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what's been kind of, well, no, it just has been important for me, especially in the last year, is like, uh, it would be easier to be like, oh, all Christians think this way, and I have no interest in learning about it. But I was like, I would love to find the Christians who are loving
Yes. And there
and
are. I mean,
interpret things
that's the thing,
different.
we don't run into them and they don't make the news, right?
That's
It
the
seems
other
like all
part.
the
Yeah.
most awful people are the ones that get attention.
Yeah.
I've met wonderful people. Here's what's so funny though. I mean, yes, absolutely. I've met lots of people who are Christians and are very kind and loving and
Right.
compassionate and giving and serving and everything. But you know what? I met a lot of non-Christians too,
Yeah,
who
exactly.
they're not Christian. But they love people and they care about people. And like that's one thing that in my deconstruction has set me free is like learning to relate to human beings just as another human being, right?
Yeah.
Because in the Christian world, it was like you always, when you met somebody, were like, well, but okay, but are they a Christian?
Hmm.
And
Yes. Yes, I
yeah,
remember
but when
that
now it's
feeling.
like I don't ask that question. I just like,
No.
wow, they're a beautiful person. They're an amazing person, right?
Yeah.
And I can just relate to them as a human being to another human being. And
Yes.
oh, they're a Muslim or they're Buddhist or they're atheist. I don't care.
Hmm.
That's interesting. But they're an
Yes.
amazing person. I can love them and care about them and relate to them just as a human being, apart from
Yeah.
that identity, that tribal identity that we ascribe to so many people.
Yes. Yeah, I would always have that feeling growing up, especially. And then just like the interminable amount of pressure to
Yeah.
save them if they
Yes.
weren't.
You've
Like,
got to preach the gospel to them because if
yeah, I
they
need to save
die,
these people. Like, I'm in their
yes.
life. That's what I'm supposed to
I
do.
have to tell them something. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that pressure. Yeah, having that pressure relieved is like, relax. I don't
Yes.
have to do anything. I don't have to like convince them of anything.
Right. You can just
And not
care
only
about
that,
them.
I can just relate to them. And you know what? Maybe I'll learn something from them.
Yes.
Right? I'm in a
Yes.
posture now of like, I don't have it all figured out, and
Right.
I don't have to.
Hmm.
And in my relationship with this person,
Hmm.
I see something in them I would never see otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's something I've been saying more lately is like I want to stay curious in
Yes.
all situations. Like if I can
Yeah.
stay curious, like you're saying, you might learn something from someone. You might hear something that like clicks that you'd
Yeah.
never heard before. Basically, I just finished reading Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, which is all about how we've essentially had a caste system in America since
Yes.
the beginning. We just
Mhm.
they convinced like the powerful people convinced us that wasn't what was happening.
We don't call it that, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
very similar. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been there. And so she was talking about basically Jim Crow
Mhm.
and specifically it was either Alabama or Arkansas. I think it's Alabama. But like all of the rules about how black people couldn't use the same water fountain, use the same pool. They like the government at the time was very aware of the fact that if you had a one-on-one relationship with someone, they become a real person to
That's right.
you. And so they were so obsessed with convincing white people like you're going to get sick and die if you share water with these
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So it was like it was all about like extreme division and not having a one-on-one relationship, which would
Yes.
probably touch your humanity a little bit if you
Right.
weren't like so far gone, essentially. So I think it's so important to be able to talk with any person
Yeah.
for the most part, one-on-one, who's not a dangerous person.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something, that's so true in so many situations that you can only other a group of
Hmm.
people if you don't know anyone in that group, right?
Yes.
And so I've seen that. I think I first noticed it years ago. My wife and I and our family,
Hmm.
we started this little ministry to families living in motels in
Oh,
Southern
wow.
California.
Hmm.
And so a lot of them were families living in motels. They had some amount of income, but I mean a
Hmm.
poverty level. But then as part of doing that, we also met people that were just flat out just homeless, like living in their
Yeah.
car or whatever. And so we did that for like 11 years. And I tell you what, that really changed my perspective because like then when I would hear people say things like, "Oh, all homeless people, they're going to lie to you, they're going to trick you, they just want money and they're going to use it for drugs and blah blah blah,"
Yeah.
like anytime somebody would other that group of people,
Hmm.
I would say, that's not true because I know, I have names, you know what I mean? My
Yes.
friend Mary's not like that. My friend
Yes.
Jim isn't like that. You should meet these people. But then I realized like, oh, okay, I'm immune to that now because I know people.
Yes.
I've humanized people in that group.
Hmm.
Well, it's also true for like Muslims, right?
Hmm.
Like you can only believe that Muslims only want to, they hate you, they hate America, they want to oppose Sharia law
Yes.
and all that garbage, right? You can only believe that if you don't know any.
I
But
know.
if you know them and you've been to their house and you met their kids
Hmm.
and like no, no, they're
Yeah.
not. They're just like you.
Yes.
They want to pay their bills and raise their kids and
Yeah.
that so it's true of all these different groups of people, right? You
Hmm.
can only hate trans people if you don't know anyone who's
Uh-huh.
trans. You can only hate gay people if you've never met someone and you don't have a friendship and a connection with someone. And you
Hmm.
can do this with every group of people, right? Exactly what you said about black people in the South,
Hmm.
but it goes across every group of people, right? You
Yes.
can only other those people if you don't know them and have a connection with them.
Hmm.
Again, this is like the reverse of what we're saying we see in Thomas and in Mary, like,
Yes.
but we are connected and there is no separation and division. And anyone
Yes.
telling you that there's an agenda there.
Yes.
They want you to believe it because it benefits their power structure, right?
Correct.
To keep
Hmm.
you believing that this is true.
Yes. Which actually leads me back to some questions about Mary, who has been fascinating for me. And we're talking about Mary of Magdalene, or
Yes.
there's a whole breakdown that
Yeah.
I'm essentially going to ask you
Yes.
about.
Yeah.
But so she really pretty much was there with Jesus and his disciples
Yeah.
frequently. Like from what
Yes.
I'm reading, at least there were way more disciples than we just think there were,
More
and
than the
mostly it
12.
was the
Yeah.
women that were kind of not included in our interpretation of it now.
Right.
And her story, the more I've learned about her, is kind of reminding me about like witch hunts and the way that we would across cultures and time, like
Yep.
women who were intuitive or e- women who could heal people. Like it's been
Yep.
all kinds of things that we've called witches.
Yep.
And there's been this like prostitute, sex worker
Yep.
stigma thrown
Yep.
on her.
Yep.
But then what I also thought was fascinating, Mary of Magdalene, is how I always heard about her growing up. But you break down a really cool other interpretation of
Yeah.
her name and everything. So can you
Mm.
talk about that part too?
Yeah. Yeah. That is fascinating. Yeah. And I didn't even know that when I started writing the book till I started writing the
Yeah.
book and I got into it. So yeah, we always hear it, and even I think even at least one New Testament passage it says like Mary of Magdala, as
Hmm.
if like Jesus of Nazareth, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Like this is the name, and this is the second part is where they were born or where they grew up or where they're from.
Hmm.
So Mary of Magdala, that's how some translators understood what was being said there. Like, oh, Mary must have been from a town called Magdala.
Hmm.
or she's the Magdalene. But the
Yeah.
problem is there is no town called Magdala anywhere. You couldn't find one. I mean, there's
Yeah.
one there now, but I think it was founded in like the 1200s or something, like
Yeah.
1250 or something ridiculous, or maybe 1500 or something.
Yeah.
Just because, we need one. So, okay, well, this town changed their name. But there
Right.
is no ancient, first century town that they could point to that's a town called Magdala. So what we think was actually happening is it wasn't a reference, they weren't attempting to reference where Mary was from,
Mm-hmm.
but that actually it wasn't Magda or Magdala, it was Migdala,
Mm-hmm.
because that is the Greek term for a tower.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is that significant? Well, because Peter was the rock, right?
Yeah.
And Jesus changed Peter's name to the rock when he gives this Christological announcement. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And then Jesus says, the Holy Spirit has revealed this to you, and therefore you are the rock, and upon you I'll build my church.
Mm-hmm.
So we think that, and by the way, other early church fathers' writings confirm this. They call her the tower. They call Mary Magdalene as Mary the Tower.
Yeah.
Um, so there was a term. It was an honorific term, right? The same way
Mm-hmm.
Peter is the rock, Mary was the tower, and also because Mary does give a Christological statement. However, this leads us to the thing about there's a chapter about how Mary was erased
Mm.
in the Gospel of John. The oldest copy of the Gospel of John that we have, it's like 200, I think, AD, or Common
Mm-hmm.
Era. It's the oldest copy of the Gospel of John we have. An amazing scholar, Elizabeth Schrader, um, did this incredible study on that on this text, and notice that in the Gospel of John, an attempt was made to erase Mary Magdalene and to make it so that it's Mary and Martha from the Gospel of Luke,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't want Mary Magdalene to be the one who says, this is why they changed it. Because if it's not changed, if they, because they added in Martha there,
Mm-hmm.
that's what she proved. Um, but why would they do that? Well, because otherwise it's Mary, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just Mary, and there's no Martha, and then the only other Mary in the Gospel of John is Mary Magdalene.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, Mary Magdalene is the one who says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God,
Yeah.
which would have been, right, an opportunity for Jesus to say, and you are the tower.
Yeah.
So anyway, we know that this was done. She's proven this not only in that oldest copy of the Gospel of John, she went back and looked at the oldest copies in Latin,
Yeah.
and the same thing, the same edits were made. So there was an effort made to literally erase Mary Magdalene,
Mm-hmm.
because she was just too prominent, right?
Yeah.
She's she's with Jesus all the way through. She doesn't run away when he's
Mm-hmm.
arrested. She's there at the crucifixion. She's
Yeah.
there at the tomb.
Yes.
She's an apostle to the apostles because Jesus sends her. That's what apostle means, the sent ones.
Yes.
Jesus sends Mary to the apostles, so she's an apostle to the apostles to say to them that Christ has risen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just so for many male, uh, a lot of, because it's a very patriarchal
Yes.
movement, that's too much. We can't have Mary Magdalene being equal to someone like Peter.
Right.
So an effort was made, it's documented, it's proven, to erase her from the Gospel of John, as you said, to slander her name.
Mm-hmm.
There's an ending tacked on to the Gospel of Mark, which is where they mention that she had 7 demons and all this stuff. But we
Mm-hmm.
know that that came later. We know that that has a tacked on ending. It wasn't in the original ending of Mark.
Wow.
So that came later. Again, this smear campaign against
Mm-hmm.
Mary Magdalene,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't want her to be that prominent. By the way, a similar smear campaign goes on in the book of Romans,
Mm-hmm.
because Paul mentions Junia and this woman named Junia, and she's an apostle. He says she's outstanding among the apostles.
Oh wow.
And for centuries, Junia became a man. They changed Junia to Junius, which is the
Oh.
male form, for hundreds of years
Oh my
because the Christian
gosh.
church couldn't handle the idea that there was a female apostle.
Right.
Now we found it again. We've proven that that was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, we see similar things happening to erase Mary Magdalene, to diminish her, to slander her. She was no, don't listen to her. Don't take her seriously. She's demon possessed. She was a prostitute, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, sadly, that's what we see. And this is kind of the whole story of the Gospel of Mary. I think I
Mm-hmm.
end the book kind of essentially saying like, what gives me hope is that we can see all these attempts to erase her, all these attempts to slander and diminish her,
Mm,
literally to shred chunks out of the beginning and the middle of the Gospel of Mary. But it didn't work.
right.
We still know the truth. We still have at least enough of it to know
Yeah.
the message of it and the prominence of Mary Magdalene, that
Right.
she really was the tower. She really was an early Christian influence on the church.
Yeah.
And such a threat that people had to go to these lengths
Right.
to erase her.
Yes. That's I talk about being books on here often just because there's more of it happening now. And I with a lot of my friends were like, "Okay, if you're banning it, that just makes me want to know what's
Yeah,
in there
right,
that you're so scared of. Like now I'm
right.
just gonna read it because I need to know what you're trying to hide from me."
That's exactly right. Yeah,
It's so similar. And it also reminds me when I was reading this, it was also reminded like we've had the globe, the whole world has had a history of like some people think Shakespeare's wife wrote some of his stuff or
yeah,
helped and didn't get credited.
yeah,
Then there's F. Scott Fitzgerald. A lot of people, a lot of us at this point really feel like The Great Gatsby wasn't necessarily written by him.
yep,
And then even with like Wuthering Heights is everywhere since the trailer is there, but
yes,
the Bronte sisters published under male
yep.
surnames when they were alive so that people would actually read it. So we have had this like
There's a very long history of that. Like even
yes,
Mary Shelley, right, who wrote Frankenstein.
that was the next one I was going to bring
Yeah,
up is like
yeah, because
because yeah, go
her
ahead.
husband was a writer, right?
Yes.
So initially, I don't think I think they just put Shelley on it.
Yeah, I think so too.
So
And
they
it
would
was like a
assume,
dare.
yeah, they would assume that her husband wrote it
Hmm.
without saying that she wrote it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In
because they
reality,
knew
we
that
have
was
an
a problem.
18-year-old
Yeah,
woman writing like something that is so which actually tees up another thing that I was going to say. There's been all this conversation about Frankenstein because there's
yep,
the Guillermo del Toro adaptation on Netflix right now. And it
yep,
is an adaptation. And so you adaptations, you're allowed to kind of do what you decide to do with the source material.
yep,
And he made some changes and he's even telling it from his experience it growing up. I don't know if he grew up in Mexico, but
yeah,
it more of Latin culture is kind of sewn into this version of it.
yes,
And so that has been making me think a lot about when we're talking about interpretations of things. It's like it is him interacting with the source material and like the
right,
things that stood out to him and
yep,
like what was important to him. And so then he's kind of recounting it his way. And it was
yeah,
making me think of these gospels, the ones that did make it and the ones that didn't, and why
yep,
I feel like it is so important to have so many perspectives
yes,
because it is all of them. We don't remember conversations verbatim. Like our
right,
brains don't do that.
yeah,
So I feel like it is so important to have all these interpretations because as humans, we're going
yeah,
to be biased no matter how many years ago the person was living. So I feel like it's so important to have these Mary and Thomas interpretations too, because
yeah.
maybe we can kind of understand the source material a little bit better.
No, and see, that's exactly right. Like, that's one of my frustrations about,
Mhm.
like, I, when I wrote this book of Jesus Unbound about the Bible, and in researching that, what made me upset about it is the fact that there even is a thing called a Bible.
Right.
Because for about 300 years, 340 years, um, this is the reality. Every individual Christian was allowed to have their own personal quote unquote canon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I did this. You can go and look like one early church father like Tertullian would he said, to him these books were quote unquote inspired.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are books that yes, that are in your New Testament. Some of them are books you never heard of. The Shepherd of Hermas, the Book of Enoch and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fine. No one had a problem with that, right? And then another church father, right, Justin Martyr would say, "Well, I like these books, but I also like these other books," and that was fine. So
Mm-hmm.
what was going on for over 300 years is exactly what you're talking about. That
Mm-hmm.
every individual follower of Christ had permission to decide for themselves what inspired them,
Yeah.
right? What was inspiring to them.
Right.
And it wasn't until, again, under Constantine, again, now the Roman government, right, the empire,
Mm-hmm.
they don't like that. They can't have it loosey-goosey that way. It's
Correct.
difficult to control people if they don't all agree on what's authoritative and what isn't.
Yes.
And first of all, again, inspiring shouldn't be authoritative. Why does authority come into it, right?
Right.
Authority only comes in if you need to control some people.
Correct.
So, that's what makes me upset is like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to saying like, I think we all should be free to say like, these are the things that are inspiring to me.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's the Gospel of John, maybe it's the Gospel of Thomas, maybe it's the writings of Black Elk, maybe it's the poems of Rumi,
Right.
maybe it's Brene Brown. That's
Yeah.
fine, you know,
Yeah.
and Lamont. Like I find a
Yes.
lot of that inspiring, and
Same.
because that's genuinely what speaks to me. It's
Mm-hmm.
genuinely which sparks something, of the divine in me,
Correct.
rather than, well, nope, this is it. Anything God wanted to say, He said 2,000 years ago. It's over. It's
Yes.
done, and there's nothing else. Like
Right.
I don't accept that.
Right. That's what it's actually it's fascinating. Approaching Christianity or just Jesus Christ, all of that, uh, from a historical lens, actually has made me more warmed up to Christianity in
Yeah,
general again. And I think it's what a lot of people are so scared of is like they want the Bible to be the Bible, but then
yeah,
like history is a whole other thing that doesn't like they
yeah,
don't ever merge in their
yeah,
minds. And it's actually like making me feel like a lot of what you were saying in the beginning, if I had been given all of the information,
yeah.
I would have felt differently about it, but it was like the culture I was in was never gonna go that route.
Right,
Um, but the other thing that was standing out to me in especially in the quantum sense, like you're saying, like the belief that we're all connected, really butts up against. There's also this movement within Christian nationalists to say that empathy is bad and that it's
right.
harmful.
It's insane.
And I feel like this was like it's the literal counter argument to that.
Yes,
Like, how can you say that feeling like we're connected is a sin? So can you
right.
can you kind of talk about that?
Well, no, yeah, it is ridiculous. I mean, look, even if you don't come at it from a religious perspective, right?
Right.
Just quantum science. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Quantum physicists are saying that the universe is constructed in this way.
Mm-hmm.
That there's only, like they would say, many of them would say something like the quantum field is everything and everything is the quantum field.
Yeah.
So even though we experience different people, different objects, different things in the universe, right? They're not different. It's
Mhm.
everything is merely an expression of one thing, and that's the quantum field. So, this is what excites me about this is like, I come at it from um, more of a mystical kind of side of things.
Yeah.
And I see the Jesus and others, other mystics point out this truth, and it's exciting to me.
Yes.
But you don't need that. I mean, it's like to deny it, to say that, oh no, it's not true. We're not all connected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're not only going against religion and going against the Bible and against Jesus, you're going against quantum science, like which is
Yeah.
the cutting edge science of our day today.
Yeah.
You are out there on an island by yourself trying to convince the world that your little narrow view of reality is true and real based on nothing. I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
you've got nothing to cling to anymore. More and
Correct.
more, the Bible's not supporting that.
No.
Other mystics aren't supporting that. And now quantum science is saying that you're full of crap. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, we definitely need to move. Empathy is, I think, again, like I said, it's the answer to everything.
Yeah.
And it's not just empathy because, oh, it feels good and we should do it. No, because
Mm-hmm.
it's what's true. We
Yeah.
really are connected to one another. And when you do harm to others, you're harming yourself. You're harming humanity, right? And we have
Yes.
to awaken to this reality. There's only one little planet. We're all on this planet together. We
Mm-hmm.
need each other to survive. And if until all of us are free, none of us are free, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think that's the beautiful message, and I love that more and more that message is coming at us from a variety of different sources, and hopefully
Yes.
it reaches the place where it's undeniable.
Yeah, I agree. It's so hard for me because sometimes like I also feel like I'm pretty empathetic.
Yeah,
And we talk a lot on this podcast too about how fiction can be
yes,
such an in route for empathy,
yeah,
for an experience where like you may never one-on-one meet this person, or even like when it's historical fiction, you're
yeah.
never gonna meet the person who lived during that, but you might
Oh yeah,
read something and like feel connected to them through both fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah.
So that's been huge for me in expanding my worldview as well. But it is still so hard for me to believe that like the goodness of empathy isn't undeniable and that
Right.
like and then even like the way we're treating immigrants in America right now,
Yeah.
like how are more people not angry? Like it still confuses me.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of it in terms of the Christian nationalism side, my hope has been that there were a lot of people who didn't know that this really was on the docket when the election came up. That's kind of
Sure.
been my hope because
Yeah.
I'm like, how can so many people not see these people as people?
Right. No, exactly right. That's been one of the disappointing things for me is
Yeah.
that we are now starting to see some people that
Yes.
initially voted for this and supported this,
Hmm.
like the FAFO, right? Like, oh, wait a minute.
Yes.
And I wish that what would have been the tipping point for them would have been, oh my gosh, other people are suffering.
Yes.
This is horrible, stop guys, this is wrong. Let's not do this.
Hmm.
But instead, what's finally making many of them rethink their decisions is like, oh, I'm suffering.
Exactly.
And now I have a problem.
I
I was
know.
okay if other people suffered, but now,
I
it's my
know.
husband that's lost his job or doesn't get back pay because he works for the federal government.
Right.
I'm standing in line at at a food bank or something.
I know.
Now suddenly I care.
That's what's very conflicting for me because
Yeah.
there are some activists who will say, like, by the way, it's coming to you next. And it's
Yeah.
like, I'm like, but it shouldn't have to come to you
That's right.
next.
Yeah,
But then I
exactly.
also understand in some cases, like, is that the only way to get those people to care? So then, like, do
Yeah.
we kind of need that message out there? But I
Maybe.
agree. It
Yeah.
shouldn't have, every time I see those kind of quotes, I'm like, it shouldn't have had to come to you for you to care about
I
it.
agree. But at the same time, I will say, it is like, you know, so you don't have, let's say you're someone who doesn't have empathy for families that are suffering financially because you
Right.
haven't suffered financially, but now you are suffering financially.
Hmm.
Now you're going through it. And so the thing is about that is that now you will care. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So I mean, I say that because like I mentioned earlier that, my family had done some work at, families that were living in
Yeah.
motels but you know what? We did that after a period of like I was out of work for like a year and a half. And
Mm-hmm.
I did have to go stand in a line and get food from a food bank, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like I didn't even know I didn't know what it was like. I didn't feel that pain. I didn't know what it was like. But
Hmm.
man, once you know what it's like,
Hmm.
wow, now you can't really stand by
Right.
when you see other people suffering the way you have suffered. And
Hmm.
you only know that pain because you felt that pain yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, ideally, it would be wonderful if everybody could just
Right.
have compassion for their fellow human being because we're human beings.
Hmm.
But the truth is, like, sometimes you have to suffer in a certain way
Hmm.
so that now you understand what that suffering is like.
Right.
And now you're like, okay, now I get it. Because
Hmm.
I felt it. And so in other words, I guess there is hope, I guess, down the road.
Hmm.
Um, as more people experience some suffering, maybe their empathy will enlarge and their
Yeah.
ability to feel the pain of others uh, will also enlarge.
Yeah. I agree. I feel like that's what has we've kind of been joking that 2025 has been my come to Jesus year because the more I've read about Jesus, I'm like, wait, I agree with everything he's
Yeah, Jesus
saying.
is great. Yeah, it's
Yeah, it's
everybody.
what
It's
everyone
his fan
else was
club about
telling
him. Yeah,
me.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, so I do I love anyone who is saying like we should all care about each other. We should take care
yep,
of people who are less fortunate. And
yep.
I think there are some Christians who I've spoken with who did vote for this,
Mhm.
who I think some of them too have such a belief that the church can take care of everyone because they are someone who is doing that.
Yeah,
And I love them for that. But that was a realization I was kind of going through is I'm like, I think they don't understand how many other, I say in quotation mark, Christians aren't doing what they're doing. And like the
right.
government does have to help people more than
Yeah,
thinking the church can do it.
right.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. Like, I heard that argument all the time. Well, the church should
Hmm.
be the one doing it. Then why
Yeah,
doesn't the church do it? Like,
exactly.
because
That,
the church makes in America billions of dollars.
Yes.
And the statistics are that like more than 90, at least 90%, but probably more.
Hmm.
90% of what they collect goes back to the church to,
Yeah.
buy a bigger building and
Yes.
get flat screen plasma televisions for, the coffee bar and,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Like it's most of the money is spent on itself. I had a friend, gosh, I wish he had done this. This was years ago. I
Uh-huh.
had a friend, who wanted to introduce legislation. He had a friend who was in the Senate or something,
Oh, okay.
and he wanted to introduce legislation that basically would say that churches could not claim tax exempt status if they didn't spend a certain percentage of their
Oh,
annual
yeah.
tithe money on the community that they were actually in.
You see,
Like if
that
you
makes too
aren't,
much sense.
I think that would be beautiful. Like I would
Yes.
support that in a heartbeat. Like
Yes.
you don't get to call yourself a nonprofit if you're not actually doing any good for single moms in your neighborhood or
Yes.
kids that, need after school programs
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, elderly people that are shut-ins and need food and things like this, or just someone to visit them. Like
Mm-hmm.
if the church should do that if they want a tax exempt status. Otherwise, is
Yes.
the tax exempt status is just so the pastor, you know,
Can
can
have
have a
a jet.
vacation home or something. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, it is that there was this social experiment that just went kind of viral where a woman called, I can't
Oh, I
remember
saw
how,
that.
yeah, so many churches, I think 50 or more, and
Yeah.
only two were willing to give her like $20 or help her buy baby formula. And it
Yeah.
was a Muslim mosque and it was a black AME
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
No one else said yes. So like that was the example to me where like there are Christians in my life who are serving, and
Yep.
I think they really did believe that like the church could take care of people, maybe because they're in a more loving church than a lot of
Sure.
them.
Yeah.
But more and more by and large, I'm like, that's not what's happening. And so we
No,
do need the government to help take care of
we
these
do.
people.
Most churches are not doing that. I wish they
No,
were. I think
I
they
do
should be.
too. You
I
would
think
think
they
that,
should be. That's what
yeah, like
Jesus
that
seemed
just
to care
makes so much
about,
sense.
but they're
Hmm.
not. Yeah.
That's rough. Well, I'm so happy I got to talk with you. I really want to read through your backlist.
Oh, cool.
So I've got a lot of reading to do.
Okay.
But it's people talking about the Bible this way that are giving me hope right now. So I'm
Cool.
really glad we got connected and
Yeah.
got to read it. And thank you for talking with me about it.
Thank you so much.